Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 12th District. I'm Kerry Kandata for NCW Life. We have a new feature we're going to be starting over the next few months, and we're going to break into it today. It's the Washington Policy Center, which will be joining us every month here on the 12th District. We'll be right back with an opening video to tell you about this amazing organization and how they're going to keep us up to date on what's going on in Washington State. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Well, as promised, we're going to take a look at a little background on the Washington Policy Center, who will be joining us monthly on this show. A great organization, and here's a little bit more about it.
In the face of freedom being eroded, in the face of a society that demands prosperity, we know only the free market provides equal opportunities for all. Some defend freedom on the battlefield. Some defend freedom at the Capitol. Some defend freedom on our streets. Washington Policy Center defends and advocates for freedom to the media, to lawmakers, and to the man on the street. Because success for all requires freedom for all. A better tomorrow starts with better policies today. Tonight we celebrate what our supporters have made possible over the last 20 years. Washington Policy Center.
A generation ago, it became apparent that the forces pushing higher taxation and ever-entangling regulation were carrying the day in Olympia. Well, a group of us who believe that progress came from freedom, not from more government, decided to push in the other direction by founding an organization based on limited government, freedom, innovation, and free markets. That organization was Washington Policy Center.
We opened our doors with 4 employees and a mandate to utilize high-quality research to develop and provide credible, independent policy analysis and solutions. In 2001, Dan Mead-Smith became the president of Washington Policy Center. He and a solidified new board of directors took it upon themselves to move the organization to the next level.
2003 brought us our first full-time research center, the Center for Small Business. With the success of that center, WPC embarked on a capital campaign in 2005 to open up 6 full-time research centers. The Center for Education, the Environment, Government Reform, Healthcare, Small Business and Labor Reform, and the Kohl's Center for Transportation. And in 2016, we launched the WPC Initiative on Agriculture.
In 2004, we published our first policy guide. This book put forth policy recommendations that were centered on the core principles of free market solutions. The goal of this popular publication is to present ideas to policymakers, allowing them to make decisions to improve the lives of Washingtonians, and have led to numerous bills and ballot measures that were passed into law.
In 2009, the growth of WPC took us across the state as the Eastern Washington office was opened. Since then, this office has been active in the unique policy dynamics of both the urban and rural farm communities. It's clear that in the past 6 years, WPC has become a force to be reckoned with east of the Cascades.
In 2010, an initiative was brought to the state of Washington to create a state income tax. A group of concerned citizens, including myself, worked together to help defeat the state income tax. It was a historic victory. Washington Policy Center's research was a large part of the conversation, and their analysis shed light to voters statewide.
In 2010, Washington Policy Center launched 2 important programs, the Young Professionals Group and the Jennifer Dunn Thompson Scholarship. The WPC Young Professionals Group was started to educate, engage, and empower the next generation of free market leaders in our state. The Jennifer Dunn Thompson Scholarship was founded to empower female college students who exemplify the late Congresswoman's leadership.
In 2012, our state experienced a huge victory when Washington voters passed the Charter Schools Law, bringing an education choice to families for the first time in our state. In 2015, just 3 weeks into our school year, the state Supreme Court struck down that charter school law. We fought tooth and nail, and the Washington Policy Center, along with the charter school community, were an integral piece in that fight. They helped us keep our school open by releasing TV ads, newspaper ads, numerous publications. All of the hard work paid off, and charter schools like Excel are knocking it out of the park for some of our state's neediest children.
Washington Policy Center operates on an annual budget of $2.7 million. Our work is funded primarily by individuals and small businesses throughout our state. We have thousands of supporters statewide who contribute to support our work and impact each year. Thanks to the generous support of these donors, we currently employ 20 people in 4 offices throughout the state. Our work is in the media an average of 7 times a day, featured in both local and national news outlets.
Looking towards the future of the Washington Policy Center, we have a lot of tailwind at our back. We've got a lot of momentum. What we need to do is we need to capitalize on that momentum and continue to bring forward our ideas that are the best ideas for every person in the state of Washington.
The burden of a representative democracy is that we live in a world of our own creation. The Washington Policy Center stands in the gap between the person on the street, the public official in Olympia, and the reporter on a deadline.
The people of Washington Policy Center go to work each day with one foot in the real world and one foot in a better world. Their ears are listening to the concerns of their neighbors while their eyes are on practical solutions that make life better for everyone. And the reason they fight, and usually win, is because of support from people like you. Thank you for all you've given and all you continue to give.
Well, there you have it. That is a little background on the Washington Policy Center. When we return, we'll have Chris Cargill, the Eastern Washington Director of the Washington Policy Center, to talk about an overview of what they're working on, what they're looking forward to, and maybe what we can look forward to in the next session. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the 12th District. Well, as promised, we'll have the Eastern Washington Director with us of the Washington Policy Center. You just saw a short video on the background of the Washington Policy Center. A very good video, by the way. A beautiful job on that. It's on their website at washingtonpolicycenter.com. I think it's .com. We'll find out in just a moment. Chris Cargill is with us, the Eastern Washington Director. Welcome aboard, Chris. You've been here before, but this is a little different. We're going to be featuring you guys on a regular basis now. And so we gave our viewers a little background with your video off the website. Is it .org or .com?
.org is the official website.
I thought so. So WashingtonPolicyCenter.org is where you can get all the information on this incredible organization. But Chris is here to tell us a little bit about what's going on. You saw the background, you saw what they do, but Chris, what is the latest happening, particularly in Eastern Washington, since that's where we're broadcasting from, but across the state as well?
Well, you know, Gary, there are so many different issues happening in the state, of course, with the legislative session and what just happened in the legislature, massive increase in spending, a massive increase in the state budget situation. So that's something we've been paying close attention to. I think probably some of the top issues in terms of what the citizens of the state are concerned about have to do with the legislature and the city of Seattle's relentless attempt to try to put in a state income tax. That's something we are following closely and trying to educate the citizens on, because the citizens, as you know, have said 10 different times they do not want an income tax, and yet there's this push by, continual push by members of the legislature to try to put an income tax in place. And then you have what the city of Seattle is trying to do with a high earners income tax, trying to put that in place as well. As you know, the city of Seattle case was taken to court in King County Court. It was struck down in King County Court, and then the city of Seattle wanted to appeal that straight to the state Supreme Court. State Supreme Court said, no thanks, you need to go to the appeals court first. That was just heard a couple of weeks ago in the appeals court. And if we were betting, we would probably say that the appeals court is likely to strike it down as well. So it may not even get to the state Supreme Court, but we'll find out here probably very shortly. But I think that income tax one in particular is the one of paramount importance right now, just because it really defines what we are as a state. It defines our economy as a state. A lot of businesses come here, they open up, and one of the key economic advantages that we have in Washington State, as you know, is the fact that we do not have an income tax. So that is clearly one of the top issues. And of course, in Eastern Washington, the other issue I think that is of paramount concern right now is this fight over the impact or lack thereof of dams and what that means to our economy as well. Because One of the reasons why we have a great economy in Washington State is because we have cheap and carbon-free hydropower, and yet you still have folks in the environmental community who are targeting dams specifically right now on the Snake River, but you can bet your bottom dollar if they're successful in getting those dams removed, they will move all the way up the Columbia as well. So we're keeping a close eye on that and trying to point out the research which says that we are better off as a state to have those dams in place, and that actually fish passage rates specifically on the Snake River are 96% right now.
Well, going back to the income tax for just a minute, and certainly the dams are a concern for all of us in agriculture over here. But going back to the income tax, they actually tried to run the capital gain side of that up the pole this year and then couldn't get the traction they needed. So they went back and did a study, so to speak, on the income tax itself. So the writing's on the wall. I'm glad you're fighting it on the base level. It seems that Seattle incubates a lot of very bad ideas, and then they get sent out statewide. And I know you folks were founded over there right in the middle of ground zero. So you're quite aware of the situation in Seattle. The agricultural side, as you mentioned with the dams, that's fairly new to you. That's a new division you guys just put in the last year or so. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, and one of the main reasons for that is because, as you saw in the video, we have had 6 research centers for quite a long time, a center for education, environment, government reform, healthcare, small business, transportation. But when we expanded our Eastern Washington office in 2009, one of the big issues, obviously, in Eastern Washington was agriculture. And so we wanted to make sure we were tracking that issue specifically because it impacts Eastern Washington so much, but it really impacts the entire state. I mean, agriculture employs more people than Microsoft and Boeing combined in Washington State. So it really is a critical issue that I think a lot of people, specifically on the west side of the state, don't really pay that much attention to. And when you saw some of the bills that were introduced this legislative session, that really told the story when you had Seattle legislators, specifically downtown Seattle legislators, introducing bills that really were a shot across the bow at the ag community, really had a lack of understanding about what the ag community does, what farmers do to feed not only Washington State, but also the world. So that is why we added the agricultural division of Washington Policy Center in 2016. And then in this past year, we've added our 8th research center, which is a center for worker rights, which 1 year ago today, the Supreme Court came out with the Janus ruling, which made clear that you have a First Amendment right, a free association right. You do not have to be forced to be part of a union to keep a job in Washington State or in any other state. And that is a huge deal. It is had a huge impact in our state and other states across the country that you have the right to keep your job and not be forced to be part of a union and compel that speech. So those are our 2 newest research centers at WPC, a Center for Agriculture and a Center for Worker Rights.
And a lot of the labor issues that get brought up have direct effect on agriculture, and it's been very difficult for the folks over here to keep up with all the paid family leave and paid sick leave and all the other things that are coming down the pipe. I suspect that predictive scheduling and other things will come about as well. Well, that is terrific that you're in Eastern Washington and doing agriculture, because I don't think anybody else really is. The Farm Bureau used to be quite a strong factor down in Olympia. It seems like they've really faded, so you guys have kind of filled a gap that needed to be filled. You do a lot of work in Olympia. When we were there in session, you guys come in and do a lot of testimony. Do you feel that there's any particular, coming forward to this next short session, is there any particular issue outside of the income tax that you're really concerned about from a policy standpoint?
Well, I think that income tax one is of particular importance because you mentioned the study. That was a $750,000 study that they put forward, and I'll bet you all the money in your wallet and my wallet that study is going to say, oh, we should have an income tax in Washington State, which, as you know, we do not need an income tax in Washington State. Our revenue was up dramatically this legislative session, so we do not need an income tax. But I think that particular issue is of concern. I think issues, as you mentioned, predictive scheduling, issues related to small business are of paramount concern as well. We just saw the legislature do essentially a 1-2 punch. Last year on workers, they placed a brand new payroll tax to fund long-term care, or excuse me, to fund paid family leave. This year, they just did a payroll tax on long-term care. So essentially, workers in Washington State have seen 2 major tax increases put onto their paychecks. And I can't tell you the number of people that called us that I saw on the news say in this past year, this past January, when that paid family leave tax was put in place, what is this all about? I had no idea this was a new tax. They saw their paycheck go down. Well, guess what? That's going to start happening again here pretty soon when the long-term care payroll tax goes into place. So you've got 2 of those big taxes that were put into place that I think a lot of people were not paying attention to that will end up impacting everyone in the state. And I think probably, to be quite honest with you, Carrie, I would not be a bit surprised if the legislature tried to increase the minimum wage even more than it already has. And that will impact especially Eastern Washington more so than Western Washington. You're already starting to see that at the national level. The presidential candidates are coming out with their platforms saying $15 an hour is what we need. Seattle put in place their $15 an hour minimum wage. Well, as a state, we do not have that. We have high enough as it is, but we do not have $15 an hour yet. I would not be a bit surprised if we saw some legislator put forward a proposal for $15 an hour, or maybe even more than that.
Well, at least in Oregon, they broke it up into 3 different zones. That was a pretty good idea. I actually introduced the same bill, and I never could get it even out of committee because you're right. They've been driving for a full state $15 an hour for some time. That would be devastating for young people, devastating for entry-level jobs, and certainly would push the mechanized automation side of things from fast food all the way to the farms themselves. There's no question about it.
Yeah, we're already starting to see that impact in Eastern Washington specifically. I mean, in counties like Stevens County, Pend Oreille County, Ferry County, counties that are really rural counties have a huge unemployment rate still, even though the economy is doing quite well. They have a huge unemployment rate, much higher than the state average. And part of the reason for that is because they cannot compete with that high minimum wage. You're also starting to see it in border communities like Pullman and Spokane Valley and others, where a business can take their business right across the border into North Idaho and get a completely different business climate, get a completely different minimum wage and different regulation costs. And I think a lot of people in that Seattle bubble, that Puget Sound bubble, don't necessarily think about that when they put forward these ideas. They think, well, people will be trapped. They won't be able to move with their feet. And yet we are seeing that. We are seeing people and businesses move with their feet and vote with their feet on some of these policies that are put forward, and that's harmful, obviously, to the long-term health of the state.
Well, I'll tell you one that concerns me, and we had one of your folks on to talk about it. It was one of the most popular shows we've ever done, was the show on vehicle miles traveled. This is something also that's been in a study form. I believe that study's complete, and I'm just about sure they're going to try to move the ball forward on that particular item. How are you guys looking at that? How are you going to fight that one? That's a tough one.
Yeah, it'll either be next session or the session after that. So it is a huge issue, and it's probably something I should have mentioned when you asked that original question. It's just a matter of when the legislature will try to do it. And for people who don't know what we're talking about here, the vehicle miles traveled tax will essentially put a new tax on you for every mile that you travel in the state, in addition to the gas tax that you're already paying. The gas tax wouldn't go away. Now, what they say is you will get a credit for the gas tax, so you don't have to pay 2, but whether that will actually happen or not, we'll have to find out when they actually pass the details. But the plan right now is to charge you about 2 to 2.5 cents per mile that you drive throughout the state, which of course would be an enormous cost, especially for those of us in rural communities that travel long distances. Now, if you're in downtown Seattle, of course, and you only travel 5 to 10 miles at the most, or maybe you don't even own a car, this won't impact you. But if you're in Eastern Washington and you have a farm or you live in a very rural community where you drive 20, 30, 40 miles every day, this will have a big impact on you. The other potential issue with this particular system, Carrie, is how you go about tracking it. What exactly do you do? Do you put a GPS in someone's car? Do you make them write down their odometer readings? Do you make them take a picture of their odometer when they drive, every time they get into the car and drive someplace? And then you also have to consider, again, the border communities, folks who live in Pullman, Spokane, the Tri-Cities, Vancouver, when they go across the border to North Idaho, or Oregon, if they don't have that GPS in their car, then how are you tracking? They're going to essentially be charged for every mile that they drive in another state. So how do you track that? I mean, there are a lot of difficulties with a particular system like this. But I tell you what, the transportation community, from what I've seen, for lack of a better term, is hell-bent on getting this type of system put into place. And it will be a battle over the next couple of years in terms of having it adopted as well. There is one potential issue associated with this as well, Carrie, and it's an issue that you know all too well, and that is making sure, if the system is adopted, making sure it has 18th Amendment protections on it. And that means essentially that it cannot be used for transit, bike lanes, those type of things, that it has to be used for road purposes, for highway purposes, like the gas tax has on it right now.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'd put that same bet you made a little bit ago on all the money in my wallet and your wallet that it will not have 18th Amendment protection. I think the whole idea behind this is to raise more money and use it for everything but roads. And that seems to be the direction they've been going for some time. It's not fair to rural communities. Well, we've got about a minute left, Chris. I really appreciate the big overview. We're going to, once a month, we're going to visit with you folks, probably have some of your other folks on. We're going to talk about these in depth. We'll go back and look at vehicle miles traveled. We'll look at the income tax. That's one I particularly want to do because I designed a couple tax structures myself, and I think it's quite clear that the current tax structure is more adequate than the Democrats want to tell us, or at least the folks in Seattle. They seem to think it doesn't track the economy. I can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt, and you can too, that it does. Actually does better than most income tax systems. So we'll be getting into that. Is there anything you'd like to say to our viewers before we retire for the day?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking forward to joining you once a month as well, bringing on our research staff to talk about these issues in depth. And for anyone who wants to find out more, they can go to WashingtonPolicy.org and get updates as well. You can sign up to get on our email list and keep track and keep up to date on some of these top issues, which are critically important.
Not to mention, you guys have some fantastic events and speakers. You've got, I think, Nikki Haley coming out this year. You've got some just terrific programs. So you can find those on the website as well and get tickets. I tell you, I try not to miss those. They are fabulous. So we'll be in touch. Chris, thanks for your time today. We look forward to having you on once a month and telling the folks just what's really going on behind the scenes here. And folks, check out WashingtonPolicyCenter.org. It's a great organization. We'll see you soon, Chris.
All right. Thanks, Gary. My pleasure.
And we'll be right back to wrap up the 12th District for this week. Well, there you have it. The Washington Policy Center will be joining us once a month talking about specific topics. But before we go, an update on Initiative 1648. The website, or the Facebook page, I should say, now has over 10,000 people working on petitions. This is the last week to gather signatures. They'll be turned in Friday at 2 o'clock at the Secretary of State's office. We'll have the results for you next week right here on the 12th District. I'm Kerry Kandata. This is NCW Life.